This movie is inspired by a true event that explores the dark side of the pharmaceutical industry. In this movie, a single mother who used to work as a stripper gets hired into the marketing department of a dying pharmaceutical company. And with her marketing skills and, of course, bribery, she revives the company, making it one of the biggest. However, a lot of things went on behind the scenes that exposed the corrupt nature of some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in America. Hello, welcome back to I Am Movies. Today we're looking into the 2023 film called Pain Hustlers. But before we jump into the details, make sure to show us some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's get right into it. The movie begins in 2011 with a young, struggling single mother named Liza Drake. Liza works as a stripper and lives in her sister's garage in Florida, alongside her epileptic daughter Phoebe and mother Jackie Drake. One day while strip dancing, Liza meets a man named Pete Brenner, a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company known as Xana Pharmaceuticals. At first, Pete doesn't want to indulge Liza in any conversation because he just failed to secure a deal. However, Liza manages to get him to play games with her. Now, after playing a few games and getting drunk, Pete offers Liza a job, stating that it would pay her $100,000 a year and gives her his contact card. Moments later, Liza gets a call from Phoebe's school that Phoebe and some other students started a fire. Liza pleads with the principal to reduce their suspension from 5 days to 1 day, but Phoebe eventually gets a 3-day suspension. Afterward, Liza returns home and breaks the news to her sister and mother, adding that she was also suspended at work too. However, Liza and Phoebe soon get kicked out after a misunderstanding between Liza and her sister over some money Liza owed. Afterward, Liza and Phoebe move to a motel where they meet a new family, who tells them that the motel is always noisy at night, which is not so good considering Phoebe's epileptic condition. The next day, Liza's car gets towed away, and she's now left with nothing, complicating her already complex situation. Determined not to give up, Liza realizes that she needs a better job, so she decides to contact Pete, but she could not reach him. Moments later, Jackie gifts Liza her car and encourages her not to give up. Meanwhile, Xana Pharmaceuticals, a struggling startup, is working hard to gather funds for a marketing campaign before its planned IPO. They urgently need money and decide to borrow from an investment bank. Pete, along with other team members including CEO Eric Paley, Vice President of Marketing Brent Larkin, and Xana's founder Dr. Neil, make efforts to convince the bank to give them the loan. But unfortunately, the bank rejects their proposal. In a surprising turn of events, Liza walks into Xana Pharmaceuticals and Pete is surprised to see her. However, he tells his boss that she's a marketing professional from a top marketing company. Liza apologizes for showing up uninvited, and Pete takes her to his office for an interview. After seeing Liza's resume, Pete realizes that Liza is a high school dropout with minor work experience. With this, Pete decides to rewrite Liza's resume, giving her a PhD in biochemistry, and also adding some amazing work experiences to back it up. Soon after, Pete introduces Liza to Dr. Neil in his office, and she lands a job on the spot, even though the company is not actively hiring. However, Brent Larkin, who has a history of conflict with Pete, doesn't like the idea of Pete bringing in a new salesperson. So Brent decides to frustrate Liza by giving her a 1-week ultimatum to invent a doctor, or she gets fired. Now, to invent a doctor means she'll have to convince a doctor to prescribe Xana's cancer pain relief drug Lonafen to their patient, which they refer to as getting a script. However, Pete reveals to Liza that she can make up to $40 grand a month on commissions if she can pull it off. On hearing this, Liza takes up the challenge and soon begins to research the drug's effectiveness. The next day, Pete takes Liza to meet Dr. Liddell, a prominent doctor who has been known to promote the pain relief drugs of Xana's major competitor. Liza presents Lonafen to Dr. Liddell, stating how fast it works compared to others, but Dr. Liddell doesn't seem interested. Shortly after, a lady from Praxium, Xana's major competitor, arrives and Dr. Liddell walks out on them. After many failed attempts to successfully pitch Lonafen to any doctor, Liza begins to get frustrated. One day, while waiting to see another doctor, Phoebe has a seizure. After the examination, Phoebe is diagnosed with a condition called CAVM, which stands for cerebral arteriovenous malformation, is a condition caused by the tangling of blood vessels in the brain. The doctor informs Liza that Phoebe's condition is currently minor, and there's a chance it could heal on its own during puberty. However, he cautions that surgery might be necessary if the condition worsens. Afterward, the doctor advises Phoebe to get enough rest, take her medications regularly, and schedule a checkup in 6 months to monitor her progress. Now, because of the noisy neighbors, Liza decides to take Phoebe to live with her ex-husband, but Phoebe expresses her disinterest, stating that she doesn't like it there. Later, Pete calls after noticing that the GPS tracker from Liza's work iPad is going out of the city, but she decides to quit on the spot, stating that all her attempts to pitch the drug to a doctor have failed. Liza gets overwhelmed by the whole situation and decides to cool off before continuing her journey. However, Liza soon spots Dr. Liddell and overhears him talking about his divorce on the phone, and she relates her ordeal with her ex-husband to him. Afterward, Liza tells him that she'd come to pick up a Tupperware she forgot at his office. Now, while inside, Liza overhears a patient named Matt Ellison and his wife complaining about a pain relief drug that her husband has been using which gives him mouth sores. With this, Liza decides to pitch Lonafen to Dr. Liddell one more time, asking him to give it a try. Matt's wife overhears this, and they both decide to give it a try. Dr. Liddell gives them a prescription, and Liza successfully lands her first script. Meanwhile, as Eric Paley, the CEO of Xana, holds a meeting with the employees telling them how bad the company is doing, Liza walks in and breaks the good news. They all stare in shock at hearing that the doctor in question is Dr. Liddell. Liza also reveals to them that she promised Dr. Liddell that he'll be the one to launch Xana's speaker. However, Brent gets pissed about it, stating that they have no funds to sponsor one. Now, speaker programs are like a fun get-together of doctors that is usually sponsored by pharmaceutical companies to get doctors to prescribe their drugs to their patients, more like getting the doctors on their side. Well, Brent eventually rejects the idea, but Liza decides to team up with Pete to plan a small one using their money. Liza and Pete plan the event, but none of the doctors show up. With this, Liza walks into a nearby bar and invites two podiatrists to join them. Dr. Liddell shows up, but gets disappointed to see that other doctors did not attend. However, Liza manages to convince him to stay after hearing him praise the drug due to his patient's testimony. That night, Pete manages to convince Dr. Liddell to convert all his Xarafin patients to Lonafen and also writes him a huge check, promising to do more if he keeps his end of the bargain. However, Liza feels they may be doing something illegal because if not, why pay him? But Pete tells her that every other pharma company does the same, stating that she'll be helping a lot of cancer patients get better treatment. 3 days later, Pete visits Liza and excitedly tells her that Dr. Liddell has been prescribing loads of Lonafen to his patients, stating that he even converted 40 patients to Lonafen within 3 days. To celebrate this, Pete gives Liza a golden bracelet as a gift and reveals that she'll be making over $600,000 by the end of the year, compared to the $100,000 he'd predicted. A month later, Liza visits her mom and gifts her a brand new car to appreciate her, and also pay off the money she owed her sister with interest. At the office, Brent confronts Liza and Pete for hosting a speakers program without proper vetting from a compliance team and threatens to get them fired. However, Pete reveals to Brent that they've just made it over $200,000 in net sales in a week, which leaves Brent in shock. Based on this success, they decided to hire a team of sales reps. Liza hires her mom amongst others, and soon gives them orientation on how to go about it. Within a short time, Xana won 86% of the regional market ranking in millions, and each time they reach a new milestone they celebrate it. Meanwhile, Praxiom Pharmaceutical keeps losing in the market, because they can no longer bribe doctors after they got fined heavily for off-label marketing, bribing doctors to sell fentanyl to almost anyone using the slogan "Pain is Pain." Months later, Liza rents a bigger apartment and also gets Phoebe into a new school. One day, Jackie asks Liza to help her get money to fund her own speakers program so that she can earn like the other young sales rep, but Liza tells her that she's doing well already, stating that she just collected a bonus of 30 grand, but Jackie wants more. The next day, as Pete and Liza present their next line of action to Dr. Neal, Brent exposes Liza's fraudulent resume and also reveals that she was once a convicted drug trafficker. However, in a twist of events, Dr. Neal promoted her to national sales director and also promoted Pete to be the new COO. Brent protests this decision and Pete fires him on the spot. Xana launched its IPO and continues to make huge profits in the painkiller drug industry. Pete gets promoted to CEO, while Liza gets promoted to vice president of the marketing department. With this new development, the profitable company decides to move into a bigger space. However, Dr. Neal begins to manifest weird behaviors, as he soon begins to get overwhelmed by the pressures of success. At first, Dr. Neal instructs that nobody walks into the company with their shoes on, stating that he spends $80,000 to maintain it. One day, former CEO Eric Paley gets caught recording with his phone in one of their meetings to have evidence that will exonerate him of any offense if anything were to go wrong. However, he eventually gets fired for it, and Eric leaves the company having earned over $32 million in stock. During one of their parties, Liza talks to Pete about selling her stock shares, but Pete explains to her that she won't be able to sell it until it vests, which is slated for November. That same night, Jackie and Dr. Neal both get drunk, and they end up spending the night together. As months go by, the growth of the company begins to flatten. With this, Dr. Neal begins to pressure Liza and Pete to market Lonafen for all types of pain. However, Liza disagrees with him after realizing it was the same mistake that Praxium made a year ago. However, Dr. Neal dismisses Liza's point and asks her to fire her mother, using a violation of the HR process as an excuse. At home, Liza gets pissed at her mother after realizing that she had asked Dr. Neal for money to fund her own speakers program. They both get into an argument and Jackie leaves the apartment. The next day, Liza approaches Dr. Lytle with her new marching orders, hoping he'll reject it, but gets disappointed when he readily agrees to go along with it. With this, Liza begins to worry that the company is now going far. Meanwhile, Matt Ellison gets addicted to Lonafen and won't stop taking it even after losing his teeth. One day, Liza watches Phoebe experience another epileptic attack while preparing for her school dance performance. At the hospital, the doctor recommends that they now have to carry out an urgent surgical operation on Phoebe, which will cost over $600,000. With only $239,000 in savings, Liza decides to get a loan against her Xana stock, but her application gets denied because pharmaceutical stocks are considered to be very volatile. Liza decides to approach her friend Dr. Lydell for cash. However, Dr. Lydell gets arrested by the DEA that same day after selling drugs to an undercover agent. After realizing that people are dying from Lonafen, Liza confronts Dr. Neal and Pete about the effect of the drug and how it is killing people, but they don't seem to care. With Lydell's arrest, desperate Liza decides to get help from her boss for Phoebe's surgery. However, Dr. Neal only tells her to use Phoebe's situation as a fire for her inspiration to sell more Lonafen to make money, just like he created Lonafen when his wife was dying of cancer. After losing a close friend to Lonafen, Liza decides to turn herself in to the U.S. Attorney's Office, agreeing to testify against Dr. Neal. She confesses all her involvement in the company's bribery programs. Liza also reveals that Eric Paley, Pete Brenner, and Dr. Neal were all involved. However, the attorney's office asks Liza to provide hard evidence linking Dr. Neal to the criminal activities. Liza explains to them that Dr. Neal has isolated himself from the company, such that no illegal dealing will be traced to him. No direct phone calls, no phones during meetings, no email except through the CEO, Pete. The investigation later revealed that Lonafen is fentanyl, which explains the reason why most patients, especially non-terminal cancer patients, became addicted. To get evidence against Dr. Neal, Liza writes a juicy email to Pete in order to get printed feedback from Dr. Neal, and it goes as planned. Liza steals the paper as evidence, but Pete catches her as she attempts to sneak out of an event. Liza tries to convince Pete that they've done terrible things, but Pete believes he's innocent, since he didn't write the prescriptions. With this, Dr. Neal and his lawyer convince Pete to testify that he knows nothing about their dirty dealings, promising to take care of his family throughout his jail time. The next day, the police arrest Pete in his apartment, but before they could arrest Eric in Argentina, Dr. Neal's lawyer already offered him a deal to keep Dr. Neal out of it. Phoebe finally gets her surgery done successfully, and while everyone is going down, Dr. Neal remains a free man. However, his freedom doesn't last long enough, as Liza soon finds out that her mother and Dr. Neal had talked about the company's dealings through emails during their love affair. Liza uses this to nail Dr. Neal, and he also gets arrested. Finally, Dr. Lytle gets sentenced to 40 months and Eric gets 16 months. Pete gets 36 months and Dr. Neal gets sentenced to 66 months. After an emotional apology in court, the prosecution recommends that Liza should be exempted from serving time, but the judge eventually sentenced Liza 15 months in prison. Moving to 15 months later, Liza and her mother partnered with some of the sales reps she employed at Xana Pharmaceuticals to sell cosmetic products. And the movie ends. One major thing that amazes me the most in this movie is how this lady played her game at the end to cut herself a deal. And as the saying goes, don't trust a bee. If you'd like to see us recap any other movies or topics you have in mind, just drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to hit the like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.